Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today I have another vintage quilt block for you. This one is called Rosebud, and this is a 4-patch block, so it's made in 4 units. So each unit is the same, it's just repeated and rotated when you put it together. So I hope you'll join me and I'll show you how to make this block. So here are the fabrics that we need to make the Rosebud block. For fabric A, you need 1 6-inch square. For B, you need 2 5-inch squares, and then you're going to cut them along the diagonal to give you 4 triangles. For C, you need 1 6-inch square, and then you're going to draw a diagonal line on both diagonals, so you make an X here. For D, you need 2 3-inch squares, and you're going to cut those along the diagonal once to give you 4 triangles. And for E, you need 2 6 and 7/8-inch squares, and you're going to cut that along the diagonal to give you 4 triangles. So this is all we need to make the Rosebud block, and we're going to start by making 8 at a time half square triangles. So we're going to take the A and the C square, and we're going to put those right sides together. And I'm going to pin these in place so they don't shift on me. And I'm going to pin in the wide points, so on the sides of the pieces here. And then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from these diagonal lines on both sides of the line. So we'll have 2 lines of stitching here and 2 lines of stitching here. Okay, I am once again using a 50 weight thread in the machine, and my stitch length is at 2.0, and I'm just going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from both sides of these lines. Now this is all sewn, and I'm going to remove the pins, and then I'm going to cut this into 8 triangles. So I'm going to adjust the camera and show you how I'm going to do that. First thing I'm going to do is to cut from side to side. So I'm going to use my rotating mat, and I'm going to line up the ruler with the edges of the square on all of these sides. And this should measure out to be 3 inches, and it should go right through the stitching and through that center where the 2 drawn lines cross. I'm going to cut it once, and then I'm going to rotate my mat and then cut it the second time and do the same thing, lining it up, trying not to move the pieces. Okay. I need to go in just a little bit more. And now I need to cut on the diagonal. So we're going to rotate a little bit. Now if these pieces come apart, you don't need to worry about it because they really don't need to stay together, because at this point where you're cutting on the drawn lines, your seam has already been sewn in there. So you're just cutting the seam allowance. You're just cutting those apart. Here it's a little bit more critical. Okay, now I have 8 half square triangles. Like there. So now I'm going to press towards my pink fabric. Okay, so I have all of these pressed, and now I want to remove the dog ears, but I also need to trim these down. They need to measure 2.5 inches. So I'm going to take my cutting mat again. And then I have a 5-inch ruler here. And I'm going to line the diagonal line up with the seam line. And then I'm going to line the cut edges at 2.5 inches. Now I still have the dog ears on there and they need to be trimmed off. I could trim off one from each square doing it this way. And then I could trim the other off by hand. And you'll see these aren't that much bigger than the 2.5 inches. They're just slightly larger. And let me measure this and see. Just a little bit there. And then I can cut that little dog ear off. And now I have a 2.5 inch half square triangle. So I'm going to do that to all 8 of the triangles. So now I need to sew these together in groups of 2, and I'm going to lay them out, and I'm going to put all of the pinks going down towards this direction and sew them together in groups of 2. Just like that. So I'm going to just stack them the way I want them to be sewn, and then I'll sew those. So I'm just going to line up my raw edges, and I'm going to chain piece these together. Okay, so I'm going to clip them apart and then press. So I'm going to press towards the pink fabric. So now I want to sew my D triangles onto these. So we have a pair of those here, and then this triangle is going to go this way. So we're going to sew this seam right here. Okay, so cut those apart. Okay, so this is what we have now. And I'm going to press this triangle out. So I'm going to press it towards the triangle. So now we're going to add the B triangles. And we're going to form a half square triangle with these. So what we're going to do is line them up like this. Just like that, and we're going to sew this seam here. So we're going to put them right sides together. And I'm going to sew this long seam here. So we're going to have this edge even and this edge even. And if you want to, you can pin. And I think I will do that. Now there is one point that I need to watch here, and it's this point here on the triangle. So I want to stitch just above that intersection where those two lines of stitching meet. And I'm going to go ahead and line up, place a couple pins where I feel I need them, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew. And get my thread to cooperate with me. Here we go. Okay, so when we open it up, this is what we have. So I'm going to sew the other three, and then we'll do some pressing and trimming if we need to. Okay, so now I'm going to press these open. So just press flat, press open. And I am pressing towards the triangle, so towards the green triangle. Okay, now I want the seam allowance from this point to here to be 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to take my ruler here, and I'm going to line up my diagonal line with this edge up here, and then I'm going to slide it until I get to the 1/4 inch mark right there, and then that should give me the seam allowance that I need. There we go. And that should square up that piece quite a bit. And that'll take care of that little extra. Now if you don't do this, your block will still fit. You won't have a problem with that. It's just that you may have extra fabric showing right there in your seam. There we go. Okay, next thing we want to do is put on the E-triangles. Now these are 6 7/8, and they may seem to be a little bit big, because if you put these on top of each other, it may be a little bit bigger. Now these two match pretty well, but if it's a little bit bigger, don't worry, because that will probably all be taken up in your seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and put these right sides together, and I'm not going to worry too much about these edges here. What I want to match up is this seam here, which is where I'm going to be stitching, but I'm going to square these up as much as I can. Now this one fits really well, and I'm going to go ahead and pin, because this is a bias edge and I don't want to stretch it out of shape while I'm sewing it. So I'm going to do that to all my pieces. Now you can line them up here, but what you're sewing is this seam here, and this is your 1/4 inch. You know that's in the right spot because you trim that to a 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to slide that down and worry more about this edge here. And now that I have all of these pieces pinned together, I can just sew them just one right after the other. I don't have to stop and pin after each unit that I sew together. So now we're ready to go to the sewing machine. Okay, I'm going to sew with this unit up so that I can see this intersection here where these two lines meet, because I want to preserve that point. I don't want to blunt it off. Just cut these apart and press, and then we will put them together. We'll lay out the block and then sew them together. Okay, so now we're ready to press these. So I'm going to press everything towards the white triangles. So press flat and then press open. one. Okay, I'm real happy with those points. I think they turned out really well. Okay, so now I'm going to just trim off the dog ears and then lay the block out and we'll sew it together. Okay, now it's time to lay out the block, and we're going to just rotate these units around, and we're going to start so that the green is facing towards the center, and just start with one and take the next one and just rotate it a quarter turn, and then take the next one and rotate it that a quarter turn, and then do the same with this one. So there's the block all laid out, and now we just need to sew it together in rows and then sew the rows together. So I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to sew this seam here and this one here and press, and then I will sew the two rows together. Now these two pieces will nest together down here at the bottom with these seams, with your diagonal seams. So I'm just going to get those started and just get them nested together and put a pin, and then line up these two corners here, and then this will be ready to sew. Now you can sew this from either side, whatever you're comfortable with. There's a point here, and I can see where the stitching lines have crossed. There's one going diagonal, one going straight up, so I want to sew just on this side of that point within the seam allowance. So I'm going to have this one lean so that I can see that point, and just want to double check, make sure I've got these lined up correctly. Put another pin in the center, and just pin as much as you want. If you don't want to pin, that's fine too. Watch that point, and it looks good. Okay, and then the other two, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to nest those seams together and pin, and then match up my ends, and then put a pin in the center. Okay. Now we'll watch my point here. And I'm going to cut these apart and look at them and see if I like the way the points look. And if not, then I can make adjustments now. It'll be easier to do. That one looks okay. And that one looks okay too. So now I need to sew these two together. But I'm going to press first, and you can press your seams open or you can press them to one side, and I tend to press mine to one side. Okay, I'm going to press the seam and then press it open. And I'm pressing towards the white, and that's fine because we've got I got good quality fabric, and this green isn't going to shadow through. So you can see this point right here, and that looks real nice. Everything is all coming together there, and that's because I nested this seam with that one when I sewed those two units together. So I'm going to go ahead and press this one. And if you're more comfortable pressing open, go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with it. by the time you put this in a quilt, you're not going to see it anyway. But what you want to do is eliminate as much bulk here as you can. So we've got 8 points coming together here. So that's quite a lot. So if you look here, we're going to have to match this point with that one right there. And so I'm going to use my pin trick. And I'm going to nest my seams together and match up that point. So I'm going to put a pin through here at the point. And I can pull that down just a little bit. There we go. And then it needs to go in here at this point. And now I need to make sure those seams are nesting. So you can feel that with your fingers. You can tell when they interlock. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a pin. And then I'm going to pin the ends here and here. Okay, and I may go ahead and put in a couple extra pins just to be on the safe side. This is a long distance to sew. Okay, so now everything is pinned. Now I do have a point here. Let me do it this way. Okay, I have a point here and a point there. Now what I can do is sew halfway through on one side, flip it and do the other, or I can just, you kind of hope that I hit it, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just hope that that I can hit that. Another thing I can do is poke this pin through, and it kind of gives me a mark there. And then if I don't have a pencil, maybe do I? Yeah, I do. Okay, I'm going to take a pencil, and then I can just mark right on each side of that, and that lets me know that I want to sew just to the outside of that line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sewing on this. Okay, here we go. And I could see my drawn line there. And things are lining up okay, so I think I'm fine. Okay, now I'm getting into the intersection where there's a lot of layers overlapping. So I'm going to take my time and watch that point. And then I'm coming to the next point here. And that one looks like it went okay. All right, let's take a look at this. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to press now, and I'm going to press this seam open. Okay, so I'm going to just press flat. And then I'm going to press to one side, and then I'm going to press it open. See if that will, how that will work. Now this is just pressed to one side, and the points look good, but there's more bulk on this side than that side. So I'm going to go ahead and press open just to kind of distribute that bulk a little bit. The thing is, when I do that, it makes the bulk, here the bulk is distributed evenly, but if I go like this, it's going to be more bulk over on this side. So there's oftentimes a little give and take. You have to decide which is more important, or you can snip your seam allowance and have just the center part. pressed open and the others can be pressed flat. But I'm going to go ahead and do this. Okay, so here we go. This is the Rosebud block. Okay, well that is it for the Rosebud block. I hope you enjoyed this one. It makes a pretty little block and it's not really too difficult to do. You've got half square triangles and that's basically what you're working with, is two different sizes. One is pieced. You know, you have this unit here that is this half square triangle, which is pieced, going to one that is not. So I purposely made these pieces a little bit larger, the half square triangle, so that you can trim them down, and then hopefully your block will go together a little smoother and you won't have problems with it coming out too small. So I hope that works for you. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.